So I want to talk to you about improving quality of life in nursing and residential homes, and particularly about a project that we've started in Northern Ireland. And it follows nicely with Jill's talk about involving older people in research. This project and this approach is very much about involving residents in the care, in care homes, making them actively involved in the shared decision process and building relationships between residents, relatives and staff to ultimately improve the overall quality of care. So I'm representing Dr. Assumpta Ryan, who is the project lead, and Assumpta apologises that she cannot be with us here today. So she very kindly asked me to carry out this presentation for you. So, as we know, we have an ageing population. There's changes in family size, structure. Things are not how they used to be, particularly think about Northern Ireland, but across all of the UK. People are moving geographically, so we don't have the same support networks maybe on our doorstep that we would have had historically in Ireland, so things are changing. Alongside that, we have transforming your care, which is changing the way that we deliver care and changing our expectations and our demands. And then we have chronic illness and dementia on the increase. I think we all are quite aware of that. And just putting that into context then, to be aware that 80% of all care home residents will have a dementia or a memory difficulty. So just bearing that in mind when we look at ways to improve quality. Looking at care homes, within our care homes, the services delivered vary greatly. Training in some homes meet mandatory requirements only. Other care homes put great investment into training their staff and developing their services. And that varies across organisations. We have non-profit organisations, large organisations who have multiple care homes across all towns and cities across Northern Ireland or the UK. Homes in rural areas, urban areas, so there's lots of different demands and priorities on the care homes as well. The move to a care home is usually the result of necessity rather than choice. There's not very many people you say, oh, I think I'm going to move into care home, be great crack. You know, it usually comes at a crisis point. So as a result, it's a time of conflicting emotion for older people and their families. And bearing that all in mind then, there is a need to improve the leadership and the care provision in this sector. So back in 2008, Assumpta Ryan linked with these partners to look at bringing an approach to improving quality in care homes known as My Home Life. So linked with AJNI, IHCP, which is the Integrated Healthcare Providers, which is a membership organisation for healthcare provision in Northern Ireland. My Home Life team, which is based at City University London, and Ulster University, which Assumpta is working for. So they, I say, back in 2008, they looked at how they could bring this approach to Northern Ireland. It was seen really as a gold standard way of improving care across the UK. And lots and lots of knockbacks. I could talk actually for quite a while about the journey that got us until sort of the last 18 months, but lots and lots of knockbacks. But finally in 2013, they achieved funding through a knowledge transfer grant and partnership funding through the other partners mentioned there. So tell you about what My Home Life is. So My Home Life aims to deliver positive change in care homes for older people. It's aimed at improving quality of life for people living, dying, visiting and working in care homes, and that's very much at the centre of the My Home Life approach. Various projects will look at the people who live in care homes or the people who work in care homes or the people who manage care homes. My Home Life looks at all of the people who live, work, visit. So residents, relatives and staff are the key people. They are all equally important in the care home life. My Home Life originated in England in 2006, originally with the National Care Forum and Help the Aged in collaboration with City University. My Home Life then began its journey in Wales in 2008, Scotland in 2012 and Northern Ireland it's 18 months ago, so was that it's the end of 2014 really, or start of 14. So it's achieved by supporting managers to develop their leadership skills through a programme of action learning. So think about those 3 key people: the residents, relatives and staff, and then there are these 8 themes that My Home Life is focused around. So maintaining identity, sharing decision making, creating community, managing transitions. Transitions can be the transition into a care home, the transition from one care home to another, transition from hospital to care home, so anything involving that actual move towards a care home. Improving health and health care, supporting good end of life, keeping the workforce fit for purpose, and promoting a positive culture. So those are the themes that we aim all of our My Home Life approaches around. And again, relating them back always to the 3 key groups of people: residents, relatives and staff. So it's underpinned by the Census Framework, Relationship-Centered Care and Appreciative Inquiry. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about that. Some of you might be quite familiar with these frameworks and approaches, but I'll just run through that to make sure everyone's on the same page. So the Census Framework, so many of you may be aware of that, but it focuses on the need to feel a sense of security, belonging, continuity, purpose, achievement and significance. And again, yes, for the older person needs to feel those, but we all need to feel that, and the staff need to feel a sense of security, belonging, continuity, the relatives. So bringing the Census Framework into those 3 groups is viewed as an effective way to improve the overall quality. Relationship-centered care. The first group that we brought through this project, this was really a very new concept to them. A lot of us in health and social care are aware of person-centred care, and that would be the focus and the aim of our care delivery. Personally, I believe that you can't really have one without the other. If you have relationship-centred care, you cannot help but achieve person-centred care, and if you have person-centred care, you must involve relationship-centred care to make that truly happen. So relationship-centered care captures the importance of the interactions among people as the foundation of any therapeutic activity. And appreciative inquiry then. Appreciative inquiry can feel like a different way of working when we're not used to it, because it focuses on the positive. We usually start with trying to fix a problem, and sort of as a nurse. That's what I struggled with when I sort of joined this project and this approach. You want to fix things and make things better, and tell people, how you can sort out the problem. So we want to focus on what we can do well. In appreciative inquiry, negatives and problems, they're still heard, but we explore them collaboratively and consider them as developmental possibilities rather than actually dwelling on the problem. So the programme that we put care home managers to really develops their appreciative inquiry skills, and they look at a problem but look at how they can turn that into a positive experience, looking at what they can actually do about it, what they can learn from it. And again, it can be quite difficult at the beginning to get used to that, instead of just saying, oh yes, well I've had that problem and it all ends badly, or this is the only way you can do about it. It's really looking at the nuts and bolts of why that happened and how we can make it a more positive experience. So the My Home Life Northern Ireland, we implemented it with a slightly new approach. My Home Life across the rest of the UK, Wales actually also do it slightly differently, so we all do it, I suppose, with what suits our audience and what suits our care provision. But the main sort of familiar strand is the Leadership Support Programme, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that and explain what that is made up of. But it's essentially taking a group of managers through a developmental programme. And then the practice development strand was something that we incorporated into the approach in Northern Ireland. And that, in some ways, was directed because a huge amount of our funding came from a knowledge transfer grant. So our focus was looking at research that had been conducted in Northern Ireland, looking at what the key findings for the research in Northern Ireland was, and helping managers to become familiar with research in their area, but they may not ever have read it before, and looking at how they can take the lessons from that research and bring it into their care home in a very real way, and look at improving the practices and the approaches that they use. So that was a new sort of approach for the whole My Home Life movement. Wales, I mentioned, done it slightly differently. They don't have the leadership support programme, and they would have a version of a practice development support, but they sort of, rather than taking set groups through a programme, they have various open events that they would do, maybe geographically or on a particular theme. So they would approach that slightly differently. But the whole My Home Life movement across the 4 nations are linked, and we would all link up quite closely and communicate what's happening and learn lessons from each other. So, for example, our practice development strand is being scrutinised quite closely in City University London at the minute, and they're possibly going to take that strand forward with future cohorts in England. So this leadership support strand, generally we recruit 16 care home managers. We've just gone through one cohort in Northern Ireland, so they finished just a couple of months ago, so that's one full cohort, and we're due to start the next one December end of this year, January 2016. So we recruit 16 managers, and they come along for a 4-day workshop where they really learn in detail about the 8 themes of My Home Life. They learn about appreciative inquiry, they learn about the Census Framework, the various activities to see how they can relate that to the work they're delivering in the care home. Then they come in for 8 monthly action learning sessions. So they generally at this point they break into 2 groups of 8. So smaller groups, 8 people coming in once a month for action learning. It's delivered by trained My Home Life facilitators, which is very important. And there's quite a process to go through and become a My Home Life facilitator, particularly in relation to the action learning. Just a little bit about action learning as well. So it's really based on the appreciative inquiry. It's getting people to focus on critical reflection, a continuous process of learning through guided reflection. So active listening and open questioning is really key to action learning. So the managers, 8 managers would be meeting once a month, and 1 or 2 would take turns to have what we call airtime, and they would discuss a particular issue, be it a problem or an area of success that they want to celebrate. And then the group have to use appreciative inquiry, active listening, open questioning to help them see how they can learn from the positive experience, or more often it's a difficult situation the managers is living through or trying to find a way to deal with. And again, as most care home managers or nurses, we tend to have this want to jump in and say, oh, I had that problem and this is what I done and it all turned out not too bad or okay. But we don't actually, as individuals or as human beings, learn very well for being told what to do. And my husband would certainly tell you, not like to be told what to do. I think we're all the same. So this process can be quite difficult to get used to, and the care manager says quite difficult and scary too when they first come into the process. But by the end, they have learnt skills that not only have they had support and the opportunity to reflect and develop difficult situations or difficult experiences they've been going through during the period of the programme, but they have skills that they then take back to the workplace. These type of questioning and its appreciative inquiry, they start to use that when they're speaking to their staff, when they're speaking to relatives, and when they're speaking to residents. So the whole way of dealing with a problem or an issue has changed without them really realising that they have changed their approach. And within My Home Life, I mean, the phrase that is often used is, it's not about doing things I've got myself mixed up. It's not about doing things differently. It's not about doing different things, it's about doing things differently. Sorry, getting myself all tongue-tied there. So it's just looking at how can we do this differently. The practice development strand then, so this is the new part in Northern Ireland. So it's quite a big commitment for our care home managers. They're coming in for these 4 workshops at the start of the programme. They're coming in once a month for their action learning. And in addition, got them to form 4 subgroups, and they met again once a month, usually for 1 or 2 hours, and usually we try to tie it in with the action learning sets. And within these 4 subgroups, then they focus on one theme, so one of the 8 themes within the My Home Life. Within those groups, they review the current research. So very much in Northern Ireland was looking at the research done in Northern Ireland care homes, looking at what the recommendations for best practice were, and then developing initiatives around the themes to improve practice. So what is the area that I'm struggling in, or what is the area I would like to make better in my care home? How does it link with the My Home Life theme? What's the best practice, and what can we actually do about it? So within the 4 subgroups with the first cohort, these are some of the initiatives. They actually produced lots and lots of different things. These are the 4 key things that they developed, and I cannot possibly do them justice reading off a slide, the 4 of them listed like that. Again, I could probably talk for about an hour easily on each of the initiatives. But This Is Me Now was an approach that the group in that subgroup wanted to focus on residents who had very limited communication, residents with advanced dementia, perhaps limited or no mobility, no maybe oral vocabulary at all. So that staff were maybe finding it difficult to connect with them, difficult to understand, am I really delivering the care this person needs? So this was a narrative tool. Some of you who would be familiar with dementia care would be familiar with This Is Me, sort of a life story book, a guide for how to provide care, about being able to have reminiscence activities to know that person's life history, their life story. So this group looked at This Is Me Now. What's important to me now? Is it having fluffy socks on my feet because my feet get cold? Is it having a pill under my arm because I've an old injury there that gets painful? Will I become anxious, distressed? The term challenging behaviour, why is that occurring now? It might have nothing to do with my past life story. It has to do with now I need to be in an environment that I'm comfortable in. I need to be positioned in a way that I feel comfortable, that my aches and pains are not bothering me so much. I need to have my pain relief before I get dressed. So it was put into a narrative approach for that. And we had remarkable stories from family members who were involved in producing This Is Me Now for their loved ones in a care home. Relationships actually changed because the family members and care workers who work closely with these residents were actively involved in, well, how do you find we make a good day for this resident? What matters to them? And the relatives really reported that for the first time ever, they felt they'd been consulted in their loved one's care. They might have been coming in every day for the last 3 years, but this is the first time they'd truly been consulted about the actual care being delivered, about those little things. What makes a difference with those little things? And a similar tool was A Day in the Life, which another group looked at the transition into a care home. This can be quite a clinical experience when someone's moving into a care home. Traditionally, the manager or senior nurse goes out to do an assessment to assess your needs before you come into a care home. And of course, there's lots of risk assessments, lots of tools that have to be completed, mobility assessments, nutrition assessments, bowel assessments, the list goes on. But what matters to that person, what matters to that relative? Is it that I like to have a cup of tea in bed before I get dressed? Perhaps if I have dementia and I don't get that, I might become a little bit agitated with you. But if I tell you this now and you ensure it's implemented, then a day in the life when I move into the care home can be as similar, as close as possible as it is whenever I'm at home. Decision trees was a one approach which a group had developed. It was a conversation tree. The Big Care Home Conversation was an event that My Home Life had held several years ago. And so in its most basic sense, it's a bunch of twigs stuck into a vase, and luggage tags can be tied onto it. It's a new way of seeking opinions from people. So what these care homes done was various approaches to basically some sort of tree. It may have been an old ornamental tree that was, you can get with nice lights on things, looks like white twigs, those sorts of things. Or literally some of them got twigs out of the garden, stuck them into a vase, put a question behind it, such as, what do you think of our laundry service? Or how do you think communication is at our home? People would lift a luggage tag and write their comments onto it and hang it on the tree. And it was just a new way of getting people to engage, and leaving it very open for them to be consulted and to feed back on the services and the care that was being delivered. Fans and youth volunteers, this was looking at community interaction, community involvement with the care homes. Often care homes are isolated islands in often very busy areas. Care homes can be right in the hub of a busy community, but the person living right next door has never set foot into it. The person down the bottom of the street running the local shop, no idea who lives there. The only people who are going into it are the people who live, work, visit, no one else. So we needed to look at ways to involve the care home to become the local community. So when you move into a care home, it's not another step towards isolation. It's just a continuation of your active life with the local community. So this group particularly looked at youth volunteers and linked in with a variety of ways to achieve this. They linked with local schools, local scout groups, guide groups, local businesses who had youth programs on board. And the fans is friends and neighbours. So friends and neighbours of a care home, getting people involved and recognising them as a fan of the care home and giving them some kudos really for, I'm a fan of my local care home. Excuse me. So I could go on and on about those. That's just a little snapshot as to some of the things that were developed with our first cohort. So I wanted to give you a little idea. We did evaluate our first cohort, and we done this with qualitative focus groups. And I just want to give you a little snapshot of the findings from that really. Where am I with time? Okay.
You have around 10 minutes left.
Perfect, no bother. I'm gonna lose power here. I'm not going to go at all.
Looks to be plugged in, but
let's just click that. It's not getting me click on. Let me try now. There we go. So the focus groups, generally, we conducted focus groups with the managers that participated in the project, so 16 care home managers. First focus groups were carried out after those initial 4 workshops, so they'd already been introduced to the My Home Life themes, the aims, the approaches, the tools. They learnt a little bit about appreciative inquiry, about the action learning process. And that, on reflection, was a key learning point for us really. It would have been interesting to have had carried out focus groups before they had anything to do with the programme, but actually getting them to sign up for the programme in the first place, never mind focus groups on top, I think we might have lost a few along the way before if we'd asked them for that extra commitment. So that was sort of the best time we could carry it out. So the initial focus groups, so at the beginning of the project, but after the first 4 days of workshops, there were 3 main themes that came through. So the managers started to develop an insight. They started to think about the transitions for relatives. So this transition's moving into a care home, not just for the person that's moving in to become a resident in a care home, but the relatives, what's that transition like for them? And they started to have aspirations for their staff. So just a few of the quotes that came up through those focus groups. They started to realise, at the beginning they realised that we need time to look outside the box, away from the distractions, demands and challenges, and that's very key for this group of staff. I mean, care home managers are everything. They're managing staff, they're managing the care, the case workload for all their residents. They're mediator between families, their HR advisor, their pharmacy inspector, they're the marketing person, they're the fundraising person. They have so many different hats that they're juggling. And they said, you know what, we actually need time away from this. If we're going to try and look at how we can make things better, this is what we need. And their initial feedback about the process, about the My Home Life approach, was that this was a more collaborative approach and they would never have done it before without being introduced to these tools. They started to think about the relatives. They established a great empathy to how the admission to a care home for a loved one must feel for relatives. And there was a lot of research that Assumpta had conducted in Northern Ireland about the process of moving into a care home. So the managers were reading that and identifying with the themes of My Home Life and thinking more about the relative and what this whole process was like. And they recognised too that there was very little or knowledge of how to support these relatives. It was something they just had to get on with, and very often relatives were just left to it. And even from a care home point of view, they were very focused on the resident and making sure they were getting all the care right, whereas the relative was often forgotten about. So this was really key for the managers to start thinking. And one of the managers says, I need to speak to these people, not at them. For her that was really, I hadn't thought about that before. So it was a big change for her. Aspirations for staff. They really grasped the potential of the approaches introduced and started to think about how this could really change practice, how they could involve this in their staff meetings, their daily interaction with staff. Very new to the concept of relationship-centered care, not a term that they had been familiar with, but one that really resonated with them and one that they felt really fitted with the care home environment. It is very much about getting our relationships right. And they sort of said this was a light bulb moment. Of course we need to have the relationships right to be able to deliver good care. They couldn't wait actually to get back and start telling their staff about relationship-centered care, and it came back the next month, said, I had a staff meeting, and the staff often they said, the staff said, sure, we were doing that anyway, you just didn't have a name for it before. So it was happening. One of the other things, just for aspirations for staff, the managers really started to look at the terminology that was used in their care homes. For those of you who are familiar with the care home environment from a staffing point of view, these are terms that can be used in care homes. Not terms you want to hear, but they are terms that can be used. Feeders, doubles, wanderers. So a feeder is somebody that needs to be fed. They need assistance to have their meal. A double, someone that needs 2 members of staff to help them with their mobility. And a wanderer, somebody's wandering all over the place. But the managers just started to be more curious about how staff were interacting with each other about their residents, and started to notice that these terms were being used. And as managers, they said, of course, these were terms they were familiar with, maybe back 10 years, 20 years ago, and they had assumed they weren't being used anymore. But actually they were a day and daily part of general conversation to communicate amongst the staff team. And it wasn't meant to be a negative sort of portrayal of the residents. It was just an easy shorthand way of communicating. But the managers realised that this was a lack of understanding, that whilst the manager might have moved on from that terminology as they'd moved through their career or their pathway in health and social care, the staff hadn't perhaps been given the resources and the opportunity to develop that understanding, so they felt they needed to change that, of course. So it was quite pleasing really that at the very start of the project they hadn't really done anything and they'd already started to think we need to change some things. But at the end then, the managers thought they were leaders, not managers. They were now developing their staff, they were developing relationship with relatives, and they were actively developing practice within the care homes. Conscious of my time, so I might flick through a wee bit here just to let you know what we're up to. So they allowed themselves to develop relationships more with their staff. So again, looking at the relationship-centered care with the leaders, with the managers and their staff, as well as across the board with residents and relatives. They started to feel more secure in themselves. And they got numerous comments of feedback from their own staff about how their whole approach had changed, how communication and care delivery was communicated so differently in their care homes now as a result of the change in the manager's approach. The residents are now the staff are now advocating for the residents. the managers were quite proud to say that their staff now question them. They also would share and say that previously when they'd question them, it's sort of, would you go away, I have enough to do. I know what I'm doing. But now they enjoyed the staff questioning them and asking them why this is being done. And relationship with relatives, this was really quite a big turnaround for the managers, but for the whole care home as well. The relationship with relatives, those relationships started to exist where before they weren't not necessarily happening, or much focus given to whether they were or they weren't. And lots of feedback from relatives about things were really different. And for staff on the ground reporting that relatives who might have been reported as being a little bit difficult, shall we say, the relatives that when they walked in, the staff ran away and said to the manager, you need to go and see them. Those relationships changed because the staff, the managers, they all interacted more and got to know that person, and usually there was a reason why that relative needed an answer or needed to be reassured about something. So that was all changing. Practice development, I give you a little a sort of snapshot of the practice development initiatives that took place. The managers themselves felt that it produced significant changes, and the practice development element of the project was a key part of building better relationships with the residents. So, in conclusion, generally, we would say it was a successful initiative with potential to support care home managers to improve and develop care. And the next steps, I say I'm just in the planning stages of the moment to get the next cohort. We had funding for 18 months, which was due to run out in November this year, and that was enough to put the first cohort through to evaluate it as an approach to see if it was effective. And we have found that certainly it is, and we've got great support and buy-in from various different stakeholders. So we've got additional funding now to put another 16 managers through the leadership and support programme and the practice development initiative, and they will be starting the programme early January. Once I get sort of actually rooms and things finalised is what we're down to at the minute. And we're actively then exploring additional funding avenues to develop this, because we really would like to think that My Home Life is here to stay in Northern Ireland, been proved very successful across the rest of the UK. Indeed, in some parts of the UK, beds are only commissioned in care homes that use My Home Life, so it is used as a quality marker. So watch this space.